One of the biggest and most overwhelming things that you have to deal with in Tekken 8 is mental stack. From the moment you match up with your opponent and you hear "get ready for the next battle," there's already information for you to take in.
Get ready for the next battle.
You match up with your opponent, you see which character they're using. You have to think about the counterplay to the opponent that you're facing. Even when you have that counterplay figured out, you need to consider which stage you're fighting on as well. Then, once the battle begins, there are so many situations that you can find yourself in. Now you have your, I would say, mid-range neutral, which is what happens at the start of every round. Then you have your up-close neutral, which is what happens when there's a lot of poking. And you have your long-range neutral. What exactly do you do here? What do you do when you are slightly plus? What do you do when you're slightly minus? What about heavily plus or heavily minus? What do you do when your back is to the wall? What do you do when your opponent's back is to the wall? And how different is this to when there is a wall gimmick behind your opponent? What about when there's a floor gimmick? Suddenly something like Jin's Hell Sweep becomes a much bigger threat because he gets a full combo off of it. What about the health situation? How is your decision making affected by having full health or 50% HP? What if you have low health that you can recover or low health that you cannot? How is your opponent's decision making affected when you have a significant health lead? How do you play when your heat is active? What is your opponent's goal when their heat is active? Whether your opponent is close to rage or not also impacts your decision making, because if you just apply your mixes without taking it into consideration, this will happen to you. What do you do in a situation where you're on the floor? What do you do in a situation where your opponent's on the floor? With all of this, I haven't even mentioned the timer. Obviously, you're not going to play the same at 60 seconds versus 6 seconds on the clock. All of these things contribute to the mental stack present in Tekken 8. In order to be a strong player in this game, you need to learn how to manage this mental stack. Here are a couple of tips that I can give you. First and foremost, train your reactions. An easy option here is to set Brian to do Snake Edge and Orbital. That way you don't just duck every single time. But the minute that you train your reactions, you remove a layer of mental stack because you sort of do this automatically, right? If you struggle with breaking throws, do the throw break training until this kind of thing becomes automatic to you. In my experience, training your reactions and making things like throw breaks and reacting to snake edges and stuff like that automatic is the best way to manage mental stack, because suddenly you have more space to think. Your hands sort of just do things by themselves. Because just imagine, every single time you had to do a combo, you had to think about every single move to use at every single moment. Whereas if you are competent with your combos, you can just do something and all you have to do is judge your distance from the wall to adjust your combo. Secondly, and this one goes hand in hand with the first, learn the matchup. So, something like sidestepping. Jin's weak side is sidestep right. So, in general, when you are in neutral, you're going to want to sidestep right because you avoid a lot of his most powerful tools. Obviously, Jin has ways to get around this by using homing moves, delay timing, all that kind of thing, but you have to force him to work around your sidestep right. There are also some matchup specific things that you can do. So for instance, Lily's 2-jab only has a high and a low follow-up. So if you just hold down forward, you avoid both options. And then of course you want to practice ducking and launching the high too. There is also a lot of value in practicing the correct punish for commonly used moves. For instance, Lily's 113 is launch punishable on block at -15 by all but 3 characters. So you should practice launching this every single time. But hang on just a moment, Lily doesn't have to finish the string. She can just do 1-1 and enter back turned at -6. Isn't this just another example of mental stack? Yes, this is an example of mental stack, but it leads into my next point as to how to mitigate said mental stack, and that is to make quick decisions and stick to them. In an actual game, there's not really much time to ponder if Lily is going to finish the string or not. So, you have to decide, am I going to challenge or am I going to risk getting counter hit launched? Naturally, this leads into the topic of risk versus reward, because how devastating is Lily's back turn mix versus getting launched? You know what I mean? So it might be better just to block in case she finishes the string. Of course, this is dependent on the type of player and if they notice that you like to mash upon blocking strings. This also factors into your own offense. For example, I'm a Reyna main, and whenever I do Hell Sweep, I have to make a decision. Am I going to Hell Sweep and just cancel to see what the opponent does, or am I going to run the mix? As the defender, you also have to make a decision in your defense, because are you just going to stand block, or are you going to capitalize by sidestepping right and launching any attempt at Wrath 2? Or will you instead risk ducking so that you can launch any of the homing options from Wrath? But then at the same time, you have to factor in, is the opponent just going to cancel and punish your attempt at punishing, or are they going to delay their timing to counter hit you? Those are the kinds of things that you have to take into consideration. And that is why you have to make quick decisions and stick to them. If your decision is wrong, your decision is wrong. You move on to the next play. Lastly, I would like to talk about something I like to call mode switching. Now, at the beginning of the video, I gave a whole bunch of examples of mental stack, but certain parts of this mental stack take priority over others. For example, near the end of rounds, a lot of characters have a string like this, a jab into a cheeky low, and a lot of players like to use these kinds of strings to close out rounds. But if you make it automatic to recognize the situation when you have low health, and your opponent is the type to go for a cheeky low like this, you can punish them quite heavily for making that decision. Another example of which mode to prioritize is to take a look at where you are on the stage. If there is a floor gimmick, it is very likely that when you heat burst against Raven, he's gonna hit you with his sweep that breaks the floor, and suddenly you eat a full combo. But if you get a read on this, it is more in your favor to duck after a situation like this so that you can launch him for trying to be cheeky. One of my own tendencies is when I have a lot of gray health, I will be looking for a heat engager. So if I'm at mid-range, I'll be looking for a whiff punish with forward tune to send 3. Or if we're up close having a poking match, then I will throw out a down forward 1-2 despite it being minus 14, just in case I catch you in one of your side steps. So in this situation, recognizing which mode is most important is basically looking at your opponent's character, looking at your opponent's tendencies, and looking at where you are on the stage. So for example, the only way Reyna can wall splat from a throw is with her stone head, right? But there's a problem, because if the opponent breaks the throw, there's a side swap, and now Reyna is in a disadvantageous situation. But if the opponent's back is to a balcony break or a wall blast, then her 2 throw will activate this gimmick. But if this same throw is broken, Reyna's only minus 3 and the opponent's back is still towards the wall gimmick. But in truth, if you had practiced your throw breaks, you wouldn't even have to think about which throw Reyna's gonna do, because you will just react in any case. But things like whether the player tends to throw in a situation like this is also important, because the command throws are steppable, so it might be the key that you need to get away from the wall. I hope what I've said makes sense, and more importantly, I hope that what I've said proves to be useful. That is going to be all from me for this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, because I will be uploading more content like this. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, and yes, thank you so much for watching. May you have a phenomenal day ahead.